character eventually catches up with you. In some way, somehow, it catches up.
When you share in the book about what the mission should be, you then move into, measuring the fruit of the ministry. And I think you asked, like, is there fruit? But also, how is the fruit doing? Is the fruit rotten? And when we're talking about measuring this fruit and we're comparing to what we should focus on versus what's too often, hyper focused on, as you're talking about now, what would rotten fruit look like versus healthy fruit? Do you have an example that you'd be able to share, one of you or both of you?
Well, what comes to mind for me immediately, so I want to first of all preface this by saying sometimes you don't, as a layperson, like I am, you don't see it. And, we can testify that we have been fairly close to pastors and leaders and not know it because they're very good at hiding it from people they don't want to see it. But somebody somewhere knows it's there. It can look like power abuse. It can look like, for me, celebrity culture has a lot of rotten, toxic components to it. It can look like only important people can get close to the pastor. So I could keep going. Hopefully those are good examples. But people have asked us this, like, what red flags should I look for? And I think some are very obvious and some are not. And the reality is that you can't always see it.
Laura,
but somebody knows it.
Yeah, yes, that's right. And Laura came up with the idea of the peach tree, and because she's got a bad peach tree in her backyard. But the thing about this, Naomi, is yes, people do ask us, what are the signs of a toxic leader in a toxic church culture? Well, I could say they're narcissists, and I could say that they're using fear to prop up their power. But you're not going to see that on Sunday morning on a platform. And if you don't get behind the scenes in closed door meetings, you will never see these things. But time and exposure, if you can get into a church culture and watch it operate, you'll discover the invisible drivers, motivators, machines that are at work in the church that actually have more influence than anything else. And in my opinion, one of the most common drivers of toxic churches is ambition for glory on the platform. And everything gets shaped by that, and nobody sees it and knows it because the platform is performed so well. So these people are good speakers. We know, Laura and I both know. I mean, we all know some people who are really, really effective from the platform, but are rotten to the core in some ways in character. And you don't find out about it by going to church on Sunday morning and then going out for coffee on when the service is over, or going out to lunch at Culver's when lunch is over. You're not going to see it that way. You have to be inside to find these things. And what we want to do is provide churches with a tool, we call it the Tove tool, to provoke and create the opportunity. In other words, we'll say it positively, an opportunity for people to answer questions that will lead to some honest conversations and transparency of some things that are going on in churches. One of the things that happened at my seminary was too much turnover. Right? Too much turnover. Most people don't leave a job because of the job. They leave because of people. All right. So they leave because of their boss or their director. And if there's a lot of turnover, you need to be looking at who do these people answer to. And if most of them are answering to the same person, you probably have got the right thing fingered to take a look at. But you are not going to see that when they do their public speaking or when they are in the classroom. You're going to see it in other ways.
The more, I do have to say, the more we've been in this, I don't know what it's become for us, Dad, sort of a ministry. Um, I feel I'm just struck that over and over again, back to character. I feel like character eventually catches up with you. In some way, somehow, it catches up, and you can, a church can try as hard as they want to suppress what happened, but eventually it catches up and somehow it leaks. And so it can be hard to see, but there I've seen that over and over again, is that eventually it catches up.
Well, and I heard someone actually just speaking on this earlier today where they were in a position of leadership. And so they were very close to the senior pastor who was the concern in the situation. Oftentimes it is, but it's not exclusively. But it was a senior pastor. This person was in close community with them, closely working beside them. And they were like, this is bad. And they finally got out after years and they left. But the response from the congregants, it's a smaller church, so everyone does know one another. The response from the congregants has been, well, yeah, but I haven't seen that. That's speaking to exactly what you had said, Scott, where they don't see it, right? Because it's different when you're working closely. And I think that's an important message for people to consider is just because you haven't seen it, if someone else has been in a different kind of relationship and they're saying, hey, this is a problem, we should really entertain what they're saying and consider it very carefully because it's very likely that they know something we don't. And unfortunately, what happens is people then stick around longer. And then the poor person who left gets more isolated. It's this whole downward spiral. It just gets messier. And so, we're not always going to see it all ourselves. And okay, who are we trusting to as we're making our decisions? I think that can be really tough for people to navigate.
And Naomi, one of the things we've learned is that let's just say that the senior pastor is abusive with power. Let's just make that the sin here that we're focusing on. That senior pastor will not abuse everybody with power. So there will be some people who think that person is wonderful. And I mean, I can say, I know stories like at our seminary, the faculty basically didn't experience this with an administrator, but other people did. So I could say I never saw that, but when people began to speak up publicly, then you say, I believe that that's going on. Now, if one person has a complaint, it's a little bit more difficult because a single person's complaint is not the same as 12 people having the same complaint. So in the great book by Lisa Oakley and Justin Humphreys, they talk about trying to find a pattern of abuse. If you can find a pattern of abuse, you don't have a problem with evidence. When it's one person, it's more difficult. But that does not mean that there wasn't abuse of that one person just because there's not a pattern. It's not like we have to have 5 people before we can talk. No, that's not the case either. So it is difficult. Yeah.
It's also so damaging to victims when they're told, well, I haven't seen that, so that can't be true.
Yes.
And people need to be really, really careful about comments like that. It's really hurtful to the person that has been abused and mistreated. I'm thinking back to when my dad wrote a blog post, his initial blog post about Willow Creek, and he got a letter that said, well, I know Bill Hybels didn't do those things. I know him, and he was too busy. And not to discount that person's experience. They knew Bill and they knew he was busy, but it doesn't mean that the stories are false. There's abusers are not always abusive.
Yeah.
They don't everybody.
That's right. That's the point.
Well, and honestly, I don't think they wouldn't get away with so much if they did do it with everybody. It's too obvious.
Yeah.